Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandre Pacheco da Silva, and this is Law and Technology series, a set of interviews with incredible scholars to discuss the impacts of new technologies in the legal field. I'm a law professor at São Paulo Law School at Getúlio Vargas Foundation and the coordinator of the Center for Education and Research in Innovation. Today, we have Dr. Felicity Bell. She's a research fellow for Law and Society of New South Wales Future of Law and Innovation in the profession research stream. She's also a researcher at the Elands Hub for Technology at the University of New South Wales, Sydney. Recently, she published a book called Artificial Intelligence and the Legal Profession, with her colleague Michael Legg, discussing the implications of artificial intelligence systems for the legal profession. In a very complex topic, I think, as I read it, that the book offers us a very interesting reflection on the evolution of the legal professions with a difference between countries, and what would be the consequences of adopting artificial intelligence systems. In February 2019, I had the opportunity to visit the University of New South Wales and speak with Dr. Felicity Bell, exploring the subject from different perspectives, and that's why we are here today, because I'm certain that she has a lot to contribute to this topic. Thank you once again for accepting our invitation and to be a part of this series. Dr. Felicity Bell, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. So our interview is divided into three questions. The first one is, how is technology impacting the legal field? And once again, thank you to be a part of this initiative.
Thank you. Thanks, Alexandre. So thanks for sending me these interesting questions. It's a worthwhile thing to explore, I think, from a few different perspectives. And certainly it's interesting to get the kind of global look at what is happening. So I think, in terms of technology impacting law, there's obviously a long history of that happening. And I think what we're seeing now is that it's really just accelerated a lot in recent years. And that's partly just because the technology is changing, and a lot of different factors have kind of come together to make that sort of speed up. So I suppose writing our book, because we were looking specifically at artificial intelligence, that has quite a long history with law, but we can, a lot of those early initiatives were not that, I wouldn't say they were unsuccessful, but they, it's taken a while to build the momentum to get to where we are now. So I think that we have gone from a situation where we probably had mostly hype and a little bit of substance around law and technology, and now we have something where the substance is catching up a bit more to the hype. Certainly there's a lot more awareness and understanding within the legal profession of what technology can actually do, a lot more. And I think that's just a product of a lot more lawyers having firsthand experience of using technology. So it's just gone from something that might have been theoretical or that they had heard of happening to something where they are actually using technology themselves a lot more. Interestingly, and I'm sure this has happened all over the world, in Australia, because we've had a very strict lockdown measures in place for quite a long time with COVID-19, most of our courts, for example, moved to doing all of their hearings online in a short space of time. And that didn't always, it hasn't always worked really smoothly, but what was amazing was that it happened at all, and that a lot of judges and lawyers who never have taken that step ever willingly in the past did it. And so now we've had, you know, in a matter of months, an enormous change where going forward, a lot more people will, you know, continue to have online hearings sometimes, maybe not all the time. And it's really just because they were forced to make the change. So I think, and once you have that and they have the firsthand experience, then they're much more likely to carry it forward than just, you know, hearing people talk about it or having people try and make them do it in some other way. So I think it's really doing, like for law and technology, it's got to a point where we have the technology, we have a lot of technology. I'm not saying we have everything that there could ever be, but we have a lot of technology that's available. And the difference now is trying to get lawyers to use it and make it part of their work routines and making it normalized. So I think there is a stereotype about lawyers being resistant to change, which isn't always true. I certainly don't think that that's always the case, but for any tech use, and large organizations have this all the time, you can build it, you can test it, but it's actually getting people to use it and make the switch, which is the difficult part. And particularly for lawyers, because they're often just so busy, if you're working like a 12-hour day, you don't have the time to think about what technology could do for me. You don't have time to research what technology would be best. You just have to, you know, you're just in that cycle. So, and lawyers don't have a lot of patience, I think, for trialing things that don't work either. There's not that willingness to experiment and see how things are. Maybe that's changing a bit. So I think, yeah, the difficulty now in some ways for law and tech is just that change piece. And as we have new lawyers, you know, coming through, maybe that change will come more naturally to them.
Thank you. And a second question that I would like to hear from you, it is, usually we heard a lot of lawyers, especially here in Brazil, but I would say in Latin America as well, saying that there isn't a field that we can call law and technology field, or a study that will focus on the impacts of new technology in law. They usually say that we have traditional subjects that we can deal with, the aspects that we can say that technology brings to the legal discussion. For example, intellectual property, if we are speaking about protection of immaterial assets. If we speak about data, we have data protection laws, so on and so forth. So my question for you is, in your opinion, is there a field of study that we can call law and technology, especially in the discussion that you bring to us regarding the adoption of artificial intelligence systems for in the legal profession, or for the legal service delivery, as you mentioned in your book?
Yeah, it's another interesting question. And traditionally there was, I guess, a field of research that was law and AI. But what you're suggesting is something slightly different to that. And in some ways, I think one of the problems of law and AI was that it was seen as quite niche or quite specialized. And that isn't necessarily what we want when we want people to think about law and technology. We don't usually, we don't necessarily want them to think, oh, there's, I've got property law, I've got equity and trusts, I've got contract, I've got law and technology. You kind of want to be seeing it as something which diffuses through everything. So maybe not something that's too isolated. So I suppose I do think that we can talk about a field of study that is law and technology, but in some ways it's so broad, it's not necessarily meaningful or helpful. And part of the reason that we wrote our book, which you kindly mentioned before, Artificial Intelligence in the Legal Profession, was that we felt a bit frustrated with the sort of overgeneralizations that were made about AI and law. Because at the time that we started to write it, there was a lot of you know, popular kind of discussion about it and a bit of hype, but it was a lot of, oh, you know, this is the end of law, or this is a lot of very big overgeneral totalizing statements. And we thought that actually what you have to do is look very closely at the law and the areas of law where this might be used, and very carefully and specifically at the technology. You can't really make big generalizations about it because it's much more nuanced than that. So I think I do understand the sort of conservative viewpoint, and I think in some ways it's logical. Lawyers, I don't think lawyers do have to, you know, lawyers don't have to go out and build tech, but they do need to ask, they do need to have enough understanding to ask the right questions about it, or to at least consider it. So I think if we talk about law and technology, maybe it's more useful not to think about it as a sort of field of study, but to think about it as just another set of skills, which the capacity to kind of interrogate law and technology, or to think critically about it, which is something that we want to kind of carry across our legal endeavours or our field of study, rather than a specific kind of isolated pursuit in itself.
This is very interesting because usually we have, I would say, long discussions regarding what would be the set of skills that we will insert in our curriculum to prepare our students to enter the market and to, in a way, build their own law firms, or in a way change traditional law firms here in our country. And when we start to discuss this set of skills, usually we have a lot of discussing regarding, should we teach the students to code? Should we teach them how to organize a law firm in a business way, like presenting to them some of the content related to business organization, relating to business models, so on and so forth. And so there is no consensus regarding what type of skills we should treat, we should deliver for our students, we should develop throughout our curriculum here at FGV. But one question that these discussions always brings to me is, what should, in your view, a law school do regarding the impacts of technology in the legal field? Because we need to do something regarding this topic. We need to change the courses that we offer here. We should think about the methodology that we will use in the classrooms, in the classes, sorry. And one of the things that we must consider is we should have some agreement regarding the skills that we want to develop throughout our activities with our students. Because if technology is impacting the legal profession, we should think what we should do to prepare our students to be ready, or even to face the market with good tools to solve problems, to add value for their work. So this is a long explanation for a difficult question, but I would like to hear from you, Felicity, please.
So Before answering that specific question about students, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things about law and technology is that technology is in law is becoming so unavoidable, just because technology in our daily lives is so unavoidable. And part of the power of that, I think, is that it's such an extreme form of change in some ways. So in some ways, I feel that we shouldn't be asking necessarily what technology can do for law, but we should be thinking, can we rethink law altogether? Like, is this a way to come at it from the other side? Is there just a better way of doing this, full stop? So not just, can I insert technology into my existing kind of legal practice or legal structures, but can I actually start over and think, if I was going to design this better, or, you know, why, I guess at least questioning, why are we doing it like this if it's too expensive, or it's leaving too many people out, or it's clearly not working, or something like that. And when we start to think about whether there's a better way, it may or may not involve technology, but it kind of is that starting point to think, well, we don't have to have these structures, you know, we can create something new that works better. And really what technological change shows is just that law and legal structures can change, that it is possible, just like my sort of COVID-19 example before. But in terms of students in the classroom, there is, just to give a plug to a paper that Michael Legg, my co-author, wrote, which is about curriculum review and technology. It's on the University of New South Wales research paper series. It's on SSRN. So that was a couple of years ago that was written, and that was when the university kind of put together a committee to look at how they should be teaching technology better to their law students. So it was looking at where the curriculum did cover things, and then where maybe there were some gaps that needed to be filled in. We do have at UNSW a course that it certainly doesn't teach our law students to code. We're not trying to do that, but it uses like a no-code platform, and the students get assigned to different tasks that they need to kind of build a program to address. So they're relatively simple things, but things that people, you know, commonly seek legal advice on, and they can build a kind of yes/no to step their user through some questions and end up giving them some kind of automated or partly automated advice or information. So look, I think we certainly have lawyers out there who can probably afford to ignore technology, but that's not the current sort of young generation, and it's not the next generation that's coming through law school. I really think for those students that, if you think about the purpose of a law school, the purpose of a law school can be seen as many-fold, but one thing is that law schools do, which they do well, is hopefully to teach students to think like lawyers. And it means you don't sit around memorizing chunks of the law, but you learn how to find out what the law is, how to apply it, how to think critically and analytically about it. And that's actually what I think lawyers need to learn about technology as well. So like I said before, they don't have to learn to build technology products, but they need to learn, what questions do I need to ask about? What do I need to be assured of? What do I want from technology. And when you think about the, the ethical and professional obligations that lawyers have, that stuff's pretty important, because lawyers don't usually have the luxury of just buying a tech product and letting it do their work. They have to be constantly aware about how well it is working. Is it producing results that are accurate enough? Is it reliable enough that they can use it for whatever they might be doing, to make submissions to a court, to research? They have to understand when it's not good enough or when it can't do an accurate enough job. So they have to have those critical skills that will allow them to interrogate its use, assuming that they're going to be primarily sort of consumers of technology rather than builders or creators of technology. But of course, there's also those kind of new, maybe we could call them hybrid roles, that straddle law and technology, where graduates might want to be operating as well. And obviously, if that's people's choice or that's their aptitude, then they need to be encouraged to develop both kind of sides of that as well. And I think probably the final thing I'd say about that is one other thing that came up in the mini curriculum review that the law school did was that there might be other skills which traditionally the law school had not valued in students sufficiently, which with increasing technology use might actually become more valuable. So things like emotional intelligence, the ability to collaborate and work with a diverse range of other people, the ability to think in a kind of very nuanced and self-reflective way about professional ethics and what that requires of you as a lawyer, as a person. So one of the things that came out of it was perhaps we need to do more to develop some of those what we've called soft skills in the past, but where if you can start automating chunks of your more technical work, it might actually be, somewhat paradoxically, those human skills that become more important for lawyers, even if in the past they weren't always the things that were looked at favorably or valued.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Felicity Bell. One last thing that I would like to hear from you, it is we have here in Brazil the argument that technology and in your field we can say AI especially will substitute professionals from a specific sector. For example, here in our discussion, lawyers. I do not agree with this argument, but one thing that you mentioned in your last answer, it was very interesting to hear. It was this idea that we can, in a way, enhance some of our humanity or some of our skills, not only emotional, but the skills that we have to relate with each other, to actually understand each other. And I would like to end our interview here today. I'd like to hear from you this idea of what would be this consequence of enhancing people's skills, or the soft skills that we see and that we know about regarding the traditional argument that technology will, in a way, substitute people or substitute some professionals.
Yeah, look, I think there is, another reason that we wanted to investigate this in our book was kind of this idea that AI would take, it's coming for professional work, and it will, in the most extreme case, make the idea of the profession obsolete. And I think, we aren't necessarily going to see that because of some of those human qualities that a profession brings. So in some ways, it's coming right back almost to the kind of very old and traditional view of a profession as a service-oriented calling, if you like, where you are obviously still wanting to make money and support yourself, etc. But there's this idea of a higher calling, that it goes beyond just a money-making enterprise because you're upholding certain ideals and values. And that is important, I think, when you look at it on a profession-wide scale, because it's that whole idea about lawyers needing to uphold the rule of law and having an obligation to the administration of justice, which is necessary for our society to function, you know, smoothly and well. So I think one thing that we already are seeing a little bit is the realization that moral reasoning or ethical reasoning is a very complex thing and not something that we can necessarily automate or will be able to automate in the future. So one aspect of that, which we've looked at a little bit, is this idea of weighing up incommensurable things. You know, a person can say, is that amount of damages worth the pain and suffering that I experienced? But that's something that's very hard to, it's a complex sort of balancing act that you're doing. That's a sort of an essentially human type quality. And same with those interpersonal things where, you know, machines might be good at reading emotions, or they might get to a point where they're good at reading emotions by listening to tone of voice and picking up on visual cues, etc. But then what happens in response? Like, what can the machine do in response? And is it enough to have a machine which can then mimic back to you your own emotions? So I think while that, you know, that type of the lawyer as a sort of counsellor isn't, you know, it's not that lawyers have to go and become something that they're not, but when given the choice, maybe in a lot of circumstances, or maybe just in some circumstances, people would nevertheless prefer to have a human lawyer for those kind of deeply personal and human reasons. So I think you're right that the augmentation, if you like, of professional work with technology, and particularly maybe with artificial intelligence, is probably the way that it's going to go. There's a kind of acceptance that there's bits that machines might do better, but there's going to be this kind of core of skills that humans will retain. That's the positive view that we have to take going forward, I think.
Thank you very much to be a part of this project, and for our audience, see you in the next interview. Thank you very much, Felicity, and thank you very much for watching.